Review book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. One of his advocacy, coaching that creates capable, inspired, and passionate people in work, sport, and life. None other than Mr. Michael Saylor.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm fabulous, fabulous, Mr. Michael. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure. As Daniel said, I'm Michael Seiler. I co-founded a company called Meta Performance. My co-founder and I started this company. We're both endurance coaches, but we also work with professionals, meaning people in the workplace. And what we really saw was a couple of things. One, we saw some gaps in the coaching industry where people tended to focus either solely on sport or solely on work. And so much of that is intertwined. And so it's very often I'm talking to my athletes and talking about what's going on at work, because that sometimes has an impact on what they're able to do with their training. Similarly, my professional clients are often also athletes, so I'm able to talk to them in a sporting context, even though we're working on maybe a career change or um, navigating getting back into the job market, for example. Um, and so we really see that the value that we provide to our clients is providing this holistic approach, and helping them really balance all those roles that they share, that role of being an athlete, that role of having a career, that role of being a family member, being a spouse or a caregiver, and how do we help them balance all that so that they can, live capable, inspired, and passionate lives in all of those roles. And that's really what we work to do with Meta Performance.
Mr. Michael Saylor, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today let's talk about people have mindset all wrong. So tell us, the concept of mindset has been popularized almost to the point of becoming a cliche. We're told that just have a growth mindset. Where has the mainstream interpretation fallen short, and what is the most fundamental misunderstanding people have about what a mindset truly is?
Um, I loved when you reached out and suggested this as a topic because honestly, I would say about uh, 90% of the stuff I do working with my athletes is it has to do with mindset. Um, and it's also to me the most interesting part of my job is helping them improve their mindset. You mentioned growth mindset, and really I would say the foremost expert around mindset is a woman by the name of Carol Dweck, and her book called Mindset, oddly enough,
Mhm.
really goes into the difference between fixed and growth mindset. And I think probably the biggest, I don't know, misconception or that people often have wrong is that the mindset that you have is the mindset that that it is somewhat fixed, and that it's not something you can change or work at. And um, I believe it is, and I think Carol Dweck would agree with me on that. Is that you absolutely can improve your mindset, um, and move from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Um, and I also think that the other thing relative to mindset that I think keeps people in their tracks is they get stuck with the stories that are going on in their head, whether it's a story about I'm not good enough to do this thing, or This will never work out for me. And we get bought into those stories because they just play in this infinite loop in our head. And we do have the opportunity to change those stories. Those stories are not who we are. It's just our brain, you know, talking talking in loops. And so a lot of what I do with my clients is working with them to figure out how do we break that cycle? How do we break those loops so that we can craft a better mindset, a more growth oriented mindset?
A better mindset indeed. And Mr. Michael, many people treat mindset as a simple binary switch. You're either in a fixed or a growth mindset. This seems overly simplistic. How is a real effective mindset more of a dynamic, constantly practice skill rather than static state of being?
Y- Yeah, I agree that the having just the fixed and the growth does seem very binary. And I have seen in my experience that it can even be situational. So someone could have a really good, strong growth mindset when it comes to maybe work, for example. But yet in other parts of their life, they might operate more from a fixed mindset. And a lot of that could be their experiences in life. It could be the stories that are kind of rotating in their head related to a specific area of their life. Um, and it so you can have this duality or whatever that's based on context, but I also think there are degrees of um, that you're not one or the other, and you can slide forward and backward in that continuum from fixed to growth. I mean, the goal I would want to get is with anybody I'm working with is how can we make more of the situations heading towards that growth mindset, if you're not there already. But I do believe, as you said, it is a continuum and a something that you work along, and you'll have setbacks that maybe push you back to old habits when you had a fixed mindset. And so, how can we, continue to practice the attributes that get you to more of a growth mindset?
There is a per- pervasive belief that positive thinking is the cornerstone of a powerful mindset. But is not there a danger in that? How can obsession with positivity actually blind us to reality and prevent the critical, honest assessment needed for genuine growth?
That's a great question because I think there is this push to, oh, you need to fill your head with positive thoughts or positive phrases. Um, there's a lot of data that shows that having a gratitude practice is very beneficial to maintaining a good mindset. But what we often do is we don't go deep enough into why we're truly grateful for certain things. We'll say, today I'm grateful for the sunset. Well, why are you grateful for the sunset? And so a lot of it and this is true for positive talk, is writing them down and making them real and really getting to the detail is way more impactful than I am strong, I am worthy of this. You really need to have stuff that really resonates to you. And one of the best ways to do that is to really dig deep by writing it down. Why are you grateful for the sunset? Um, why are you grateful for this, that, or the other? And then really digging into seeing how that resonates with you and make it, it true. It's going to be much more impactful than some sort of generic platitude of you've got this, you can do this. Yes, those sometimes help you get over the hump of some time of something you're dealing with, but by having those things that are really true to your being will have much more impact on your positivity.
More impact for sure. Let's talk about the hustle culture version of mindset, the one that preaches relentless grinding and willpower above else. Why is this model not only unsustainable but potentially damaging, and what crucial element does it completely ignore?
I'm glad you brought that. My co-founder and business partner, we always talk about the type A plus people. These are the people who want to do an Ironman. They're a have a high powered job. They have a family, and they want to do everything to the utmost. And part of our job, and this is really where we see a lot of the crossover between sport and life and work, is um, it isn't sustainable to your point. And what you see in athletics is when you're using a typical periodized training plan, you're typically, building for 3 weeks, and then you're taking a week of recovery. And what a lot of people in this hustle culture is there is no recovery, there's no stillness, there's no stopping, and that's a recipe for burnout. And so a lot of what we're trying to do with our clients is to say, you've just gone through this big, say you're prepping for a big board of directors meeting. How do we build in a break after that, whether it's whatever you can afford, a day, or just a slower week, just like we would an athlete after they've built their training up for 3 weeks. We're going to give them recovery because that's what allows their body to grow. That's where the adaptation happens. Um, but we've gotten into this go, 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 go mindset. I'll rest when I'm dead. And then people get 3 or 4 years down the road and they're burnt out, they're unhappy, their family life's a mess, their work's a mess, because they're just go, go, go all the time without taking the time to let their body grow, to adapt to the things that they're doing.
Interesting, Mr. Michael. And people often use mindset as a form of spiritual bypassing, using affirmations to paper overall real pain or systemic problems. How can we distinguish between a mindset that empowers and one that simply helps us avoid dealing with necessary struggles?
Um, the tools I use with my folks is really getting, as I talked about earlier in our conversation, that we get these stories of pain and woe in our head. It could be a situation with a family member. It could be a situation um, at work, whatever it is. And there's just this running loop in our head of this story. And until we get that out of our head um, and onto paper, we're never going to really see clearly what's going on. And we are also aren't going to clearly be able to address the problem. And oftentimes, that letting the story manifest itself in our head is a way to avoid dealing with the problem, whatever that problem is. And so, with my clients, it starts with let's get that story that's in your head and put it on literally on paper, handwrite it on paper, and we're gonna go over that story and break apart the parts that are your brain just going crazy um, and making stuff up, and what's really the right thing and the real issue, and getting to the bottom of that. And it's often smaller than they were thinking once they've broken it down and they can start to see, oh well, maybe it wasn't really like that, it was more like this. Great. Okay, now what are we going to do about that, and how do we build an action plan from that so that we can get beyond that avoidance and actually deal with what's going on in their life.
Mr. Michael, as a coach that inspired a passionate people in work, sport, and life, what are your short term and long term goals?
our short-term goals really is we started our company almost 3 years ago. We're coming up on 3 years. Although both my partner and I have been coaching for 10 or 12 years each. Um, and we've started adding more coaches. So part of our short-term growth is to continue to grow our business. Our long-term goal is how do we have this type of impact with more people? How can we help? You know, as our tagline says, how do we create more capable, inspired, and passionate people? And have more of an impact. We never got into this really for the money. Um, in fact, one of the ways we talked about measuring our success is how many people have we positively impacted their lives. And so our driving goal has been to how do we get more people, how do we work with more people to have this type of impact? Because we think it's a missing thing. People do hire coaches for sports and they hire executive coaches, but very rarely do you find a coach that can help them balance all of that. So our really long-term goal, our goals are grow the business with more coaches, which is going to allow us to work with more people so that we can impact more people's lives positively.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Michael, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
You mean as far as being a coach, or?
Yes, please, as a coach.
Um, that's a great and very timely question. I was mentoring uh, a colleague, and she's looking to change careers, and she's identified a couple of avenues, and one of them was as a coach. And um, but she said her concern was, I don't have any coaching experience, and I said, well, think back um, to times you've mentored someone or helped them work through a problem. Chances are you were coaching them. And so start to get that type of experience, whether getting yourself into, if you're interested in coaching, um, find opportunities at work where you can mentor someone, um, coach a little league team. Even that gets you into understanding how coaches work. And then there's certainly courses out there. I haven't primarily the athletes I work with are primarily runners or cyclists. So USA Cycling, for example, has coaching certifications and continuing education. So that's a way where you can go and get certified. You can get a ton of great education on how to be a coach and how to continue to be a better coach, and then start coaching. Um, Once you've got some basic skills, start working with folks, and you'll just continue to grow as a coach. I will say, if you're interested in coaching, I mean, you really do have to love um, working with people. It's really about helping them be successful. That's how you measure your success, and that to me has been very rewarding through the many years that I've been coaching. Is being able to see other people succeed, often when they didn't think they'd be able to.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Michael, as well as your advice. Thank you so much for that advice. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
I would recommend two. The one I mentioned earlier is by Carol Dweck. It's Weck. Her book is called Mindset: The New Psychology of Success. What's great about the book, even though it has a ton of science backing it, it's very accessible from a reading standpoint. But it really helps you understand, what is mindset, what's a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. That would be the one I would start if you really want to dip into better understanding of mindset. The second book I would recommend is a book called Master of Change. It's by an author named Brad Stulberg, Stulberg. With all the change going on in the world, he did a great job of really helping. He describes how to develop rugged flexibility, and that has a lot to do with mindset. And people with a growth mindset, aren't easily rattled by setbacks or change. They see it as an opportunity for learning, for growing. And so I think understanding those things, um, that are going to change around you. I think in his book he quotes, "We all have about 32. We average about 32 what he calls disorder events in our lives. It could be a new job, could be death of a loved one, could be something like COVID, and those types of change come at us, and we have to be able to deal with them. And having the right mindset is going to help us come out on the other side a stronger person."
Thank you for that, Mr. Michael. And we often hear about limiting belief, but what about liberating constraints? How can intentionally placing limits in our options, our time, or our focus actually create more powerful and creative mindset?
Ooh, um, well, I think part of I'm actually looking up at. I have a bunch of guitars hanging on the wall over here, and one of the practices that I do when I'm practicing guitar is to place limitations. So, for example, if I'm practicing soloing, I'll place this just artificial constraint of you can only use three notes, and how can you create an interesting creative solo over a piece of music using only three notes. And it's pushing these types of limitations on me really sparks my creativity. It gets me out of ruts. And I've seen that work on both on the athletic side, um, where even things like, okay, you can only spin, in this gear, and it helps them develop different things. So there are ways that you can do those kind of limitations, enforcing these limitations on yourself to either spark creativity, to focus on developing a new skill or improving a weakness. Um, so that they're very useful to put these kind of limitations on yourself.
Mr. Michael, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review, Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Michael, if it the common understanding of mindset is flawed map, what is the true territory if we had to replace the word mindset with a more accurate phrase that captures the depth and nuance of what's truly required? What would that phrase be?
Oh, wow. Um, I would use the word outlook.
Mm,
Um, and the reason I like that word is it's kind of hints at how you look at things. Because even the word mindset, there's that part of the word set, which implies fixed. Whereas outlook is not only you're kind of saying, how do you look at things? How do you approach things? What's your outlook on this? Feels much more open ended, much more of that gradient that we talked about earlier, and not binary like fixed or growth. So maybe Outlook would be the word I would use.
Outlook indeed. And Mr. Michael Seiler, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy or anything you want to promote on Book 101?
Um, Best place to stay in touch with us. You've got our website up, but we are most active on Instagram, and that's at metta dot performance. It's the best place to keep up with us. We're also always posting interesting tidbits. It's also the best way to reach out to us if you want to work with one of our coaches. We do have bios of all our coaches out on our website, so you can find a coach that most closely matches um, with your personality and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Michael because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering coaching to come. So, Mr. Michael, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It was great talking with you.
Maricon people, see you soon.